Hello and welcome to Dialogue. At the 48th session of the UN Human Rights Council on Tuesday, Minister of the Chinese mission to the UN in Geneva, Jiang Duan, issued a joint statement on behalf of many countries calling for an investigation into alleged crimes by U.S. military personnel in Afghanistan, including the killing of civilians, torture, and other human rights abuses. What more did the joint statement say, and how will the UN address these human rights allegations? On another topic, China has launched plans to expand one of its most ambitious projects to energize growth and innovation throughout the Pearl River Delta. The Qianhai New District, formed in 2010, will now be expanded from 15 square kilometers to over 120, an area equivalent to Hong Kong Island and Kowloon Peninsula combined, and will pose Qianhai as a leading player in the Guangdong-Hong Kong-Macau Greater Bay Area. So what's unfolding in the Bay Area now, and how is this cooperation zone helping Hong Kong businesses and also deepening reform and opening up in the region? To find out more, I'm joined by Professor John Gong at the University of International Business and Economics, Wang Huiyao, President of the Center for China and Globalization, and Steve King, crowd-funded Professor of Economics on Patreon. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. So we'll start with the human rights violations possibly in Afghanistan, for example. So John, I will start with you. China is calling for a thorough and also impartial investigation into the crimes and human rights violations in Afghanistan in the past 20 years during the U.S. occupation. Given what happened, for example, the latest incident of the killing of 10 innocent civilians in Kabul, which was mistaken as the terrorists, obviously. So obviously there's a need to look into some of the behaviors of the U.S. Military personnel.
Well, there's a wealth of evidence that war crimes have indeed been committed in these very sad 20 years. A lot of Afghan people have fallen victim to this kind of war crime. For example, it's a proven event that the previous administration, President Trump, exonerated a high-level U.S. officer who was indeed committing war crimes and who has witnesses on the spot to say that he has indeed committed war crimes. And there are some other incidences. The event you referred to, as reviewed by New York Times and Washington Post and CNN, is also investigating this. I would say this is something that has to be investigated. The official U.S. stance is that these are collateral damages. They are not committed intentionally, but I think there are still a lot of evidences that crimes have indeed been committed. For example, the United States government has been actively engaged in disrupting the investigation by the International Criminal Court. The previous Secretary of State Pompeo has openly said that the ICC, International Criminal Court, is a kangaroo court. I'm not sure the 120-some sovereign countries who have signed on to the ICC agree with that statement, but nevertheless, they have been actively obstructing justice, in my view. So, why they are doing this? There got to be the case that there's something to be discovered. There's a dirty laundry, for sure, left behind by 20 years of occupation by the United States in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's one figure saying that at least 47,000 Afghan civilians had been killed in the war during the past 20 years. Obviously, civilians died of probably violent situations, either from the Taliban or from the government forces or from the U.S. bombing. We cannot blame the U.S. alone, but Huiyao, if you look at the situation, there's a need to look into those specific allegations, situations over there. And if you look at the new government, obviously they say the value-based foreign policy. When they withdrew from Afghanistan, human rights consideration seems is not the top concern.
Yeah, well, That's right. I think that it's really a time that we need to take a serious reflection and also looking back at the 20 years, which is not a short time. And as you said, if nearly 500,000 people get killed in Afghanistan, it's such a terrific, horrific crime that I would say. But also, of course, I mean, it's a war situation. But again, it lasted such a long time. It has actually crippled the Afghan economy, and also, of course, I think, of course, you hit Taliban, but now Taliban back in power, and I think the only objective is that they wiped out Bin Laden, which is, I think, justified. But again, it's not really justifiable for 20 years prolonged war and with trillions of dollars, even with several thousand U.S. Soldier casualty there too. So I think the international community to look back, and also international Human Rights Council of UN to look back and check into this. So I think it's justified. I think we need to look into that and then really draw the lessons and make sure that we don't commit this kind of mistakes or crimes again in the future. It's absolutely we need human right should be safeguarded in all aspects, and so this is really one aspect that we could not neglect at all. So while we are taking a look at this very sad and very miserable moment, and we really need to reflect and think hard what went wrong, and that is really the key question we have to answer for that.
Mm-hmm. As Huyo has said, John, U.S. if the U.S. Prioritize value-based diplomacy such as freedom and human rights, obviously, the international community will hold the U.S. up to its own standard, and you cannot ignore some of the behaviors. For example, being investigated by the International Criminal Court. We know when there is a ICC investigation, it's about war of crimes, it's about the torture, it's about the genocide, serious issues there. But at the same time, we see at least the previous U.S. administration and Trump saying that they have not only refused to be investigated, but also they imposed sanctions on the prosecutor from ICC. What does that say about the attitudes, at least from some of the U.S. officials, if not entirely the U.S. government?
I think it's more than just a human rights issue. I mean, here we're really talking about investigation of war crimes. I mean, this goes well beyond human rights. I mean, human rights standard can be debatable. Different countries have different standards, and people disagree on what's counted as human rights violation. But war crime, I don't think there's a lot of dispute about war crimes. And the fact that the ICC's investigation is obstructed by U.S. government and the leading prosecutors being personally sanctioned by the U.S. government testify to the potential that there's something to be covered up. And there's a wide range of reports that are being leaking out that even leaking out from the U.S. government that war crimes have been indeed be committed, and these people have not been held accountable, pretty much under the protection of the U.S. government. So I think in itself, refusing to investigate into war crimes is probably the most, it's the gross violation of human rights in its first place. So I think again I want to emphasize this is more than just a human rights violation. This is basically a cover-up and protection of those criminals engaged in war crimes, and that's just pathetic.
More serious than human rights violations. Let's shift our focus to the Qianhai new area. So Huyo, again, give us some background about this Qianhai Cooperation Zone, which was created in 2010. So what is the original purpose? Why such an area was created in the first place?
Well, I think that China has really adopted a very progressive model of learning by doing, and of course also touching the stone while crossing the river. But I think that we already had the success of 4 economic zones and 14 coastal cities, and then Pudong development, and now 21, the free trade zone. But of course, Shanghai established about 10 years ago is actually experiment at that time to be a financial district, which I think they are adjunct to Hong Kong, but also they want to, maybe import a lot of Hong Kong, best practices and all those economic models into Shenzhen and as a matter of fact to the Greater China. But of course, this has been experimented with a lot of success, with a lot of advancement. But now I think this is more ambitious plan is now with the latest policy just announced that Shanghai is going to expand it from 15 kilometers to 120 kilometers. Basically another Hong Kong, larger than Hong Kong probably. So we're seeing the area is really shaping into another powerhouse that going to be a magnetic, attracting capitals, talents, and companies all over the world to tap into the next growing potential of China. So this is really very important timing, and as well as to link that to Macau and the Hengqin area. So I think this is a very ambitious plan with a very bold policy. It's another new experiment of a free trade zone, and I think it will have another decades of impact in China and the world, and we'll see many new things will come up.
Mm-hmm. Steve, tell us why is the need for this expansion, which is like 8 times the original size of this region?
Oh, well, when the region was first converted into a free trade zone, it was a very bold experiment back in the early 1980s, and of course it's been successful, and it's transformed China from a manufacturing backwater into a manufacturing powerhouse. And of course the desire is to continue doing that. So I can easily understand why they wish to expand it. That is, on the other hand, a gigantic expansion. It's something which would be, I think, be very difficult to manage. You certainly can't just suddenly turn something from 16 square kilometres into 160 and replicate what was in the 16 in the 160. It's a huge challenge. And also, whereas the original expansion of the free trade zone was based on importing American technology and American companies, this will be much more Chinese and Hong Kong companies trying to do the same thing. So I don't think we should expect the same rate of growth, and there'll be challenges this time around that weren't faced back in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, obviously this expansion of this Qianhai cooperation zone is important not only to, say, Shenzhen, to the Great Bay Area, but also to Hong Kong. Tell us, how is it related to Hong Kong?
Well, this area is actually has already seen a burgeoning industry, the banking industry, financial industry in this region. Reportedly, there are several hundred financial companies, banks, insurance companies, other financial institutions have already called it home. And I think with Hong Kong's very strong and famous banking industry, financial industry, there got to be some synergy behind it, such that a greater integration could happen. After all, the Greater Bay Area integration is the most important theme behind all of these developments. And there's already reports or theories or suggestions that this could serve as a backyard for Hong Kong in terms of providing activities related to finance industry, in terms of creating more jobs for young generation, young people in Hong Kong, for startup companies, and also in terms of having some more companies that could not have set up in Hong Kong because of expense reasons to be set up in Qianhai area. So I think the overall theme is indeed integration, and with integration, the entire pie covering Hong Kong, covering Guangzhou, covering Shenzhen, and now covering Shanghai would be even bigger. So I think every time when we have integration, regional integration, there are always going to be economic benefits, and down to individual level as well. So I think this bodes very well for people in Hong Kong, especially those entrepreneurs and young people.
Well, Steve, what do you say about this, the impact of this new zone, obviously in terms of the relationship between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, but also, between Hong Kong as part of the country, one country, two systems?
Yeah, I mean, this when Hong Kong was 10 times the size of the Shenzhen region, then Hong Kong was quite a distinct entity. If you now make the what used to be Shenzhen into something equivalent size to Hong Kong, and ultimately I imagine equivalent population as well, then the sheer increase in relative size blends Hong Kong into an extension of China rather than a separate entity. Whether that'll work or not, we'll have to wait and see. My main guidance would be don't be too ambitious about expanding the financial sector. If you let the financial sector dominate the economy, you get the sort of financial crises that the West had in 2008. You have to make sure finance remains a servant of the industrial sector, not the master.
Huiyou, what do you think of what Steve has mentioned about if you stress too much about the financial sector, instead of this manufacturing, or sometimes people call it like real economy, and which is seen as critical to the long-term development of a nation?
Well, I don't think that the new expanded Qianhai area will be all financial district. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's not. It combined many of the Shenzhen manufacturer base. It will be certainly high-tech incubated ground, and most of all, I think it will be combined with the financial power from Hong Kong, but also with the manufacturing base in Shenzhen. So it will make a new hybrid that will be a new thrust to the global economy, because with the global globalization that is already a high degree of globalization in Hong Kong, with the manufacturer base. Now, after that, we have the whole China to be a supply on that, with all the talents and all the technology, so this great Bay Area. Now we have first time have a huge substance, particularly when the governments between Hong Kong and Guangzhou and Guangdong and that area are now highly integrated into economically. You expect miracles. I think the significance is huge, because this is the area that combined with the capital, with the manufacturing powerhouse, with the talents, but also with the attraction to the world now. Because before people come to Hong Kong, very limited applications. Now if they come to Hong Kong with a huge vast inland to apply with all those 15% tax low bracket, and with all the profession open for global talents. So you can imagine this is going to be a new special economic zone. It's a special Hong Kong Shenzhen economic zone in the 21st century, which we're going to have the same impact in the 80s like Shenzhen economic zone to China at that time. So I'm highly optimistic on that.
John, but still, obviously, this region is expected to play a role in terms of, for example, the RMB, the yuan's internationalization, or cross-border use of renminbi in Qianhai, in Shenzhen, and Hong Kong. And of course, you want to tap the potential strength of Hong Kong as a financial hub.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the things you mentioned mostly are about finance and banking. The fact is that the name of this place, according to the official government document, is a service-based pilot zone. Right? It's a service-based pilot zone. So I'm pretty sure the local government is eyeing mostly on the service industries, and we all know that. I mean, finance is just one piece of that, and there are other things, as explicitly mentioned in the government's document. There are healthcare-related industries, health science, R&D, all these things. But I think mostly they are sort of service-oriented sectors that the local government is looking after. Now, even talking about finance, I think there is an adjective in front of the word finance mentioned in the government document. It says the banking industry or the financial industry serving the real economy. I mean, that's just a very important adjective, serving the real economy. So I think the government has clear-minded about developing a financial capital market industry serving the real economy, which this area already has a basis. I mean, as I said, it has hundreds of financial institutions already operating there. So I think this is going to be a very big play in terms of regional integration. And I think it's mostly going to be service-oriented development.
Mm-hmm. Well, Steve, already there are over 11,000 Hong Kong invested companies, registered in Qianhai region here, and it is also expected to be a hub of technology, of innovation. There's expectation, universities and colleges from Hong Kong will set up, or some of them are already doing that, laboratories for innovation, for the purpose of innovation and new technologies in the Qianhai zone. What is the prospect of that? As far as we know already, the DDI is a kind of like a joint product of Shenzhen and Hong Kong.
Well, technology is, it's sort of a magic word to cover a multitude of activities and sins. Whether innovation will work or not often relies upon whether you have neighboring companies that you can benefit in developing ideas from and bringing technologies together that have a synergy with each other. So certainly promoting a region where this is a concentration of where you have multiple industries integrated with the universities, that gives you a prospect for that succeeding. But again, I think it's important for China now to look at directing its production and its technology more towards its domestic market than just the international market. I think what we've seen with COVID is only the beginning of a breakdown of globalization. And I think anything which is based upon an export demand as a basis is likely to be less successful now, certainly than it was back in the 1980s. That's my main caution, directed to what China's own needs are rather than focusing upon a market to make money out of it via globalized technology.
Mm-hmm. We are obviously other functions basically being expected out of this new zone is they want to use this Qianhai zone to cultivate a globally competitive business environment by 2035, and also to make this Great Bay Area as one of the top Bay Area worldwide, world-class Bay Area, basically equivalent to that for Tokyo, San Francisco, or New York. Some people say there's a future China Silicon Valley. Are we expecting any preferential policies to make that happen?
Well, I think there's already a lot of preferential policy being issued or to be issued. But again, it's going to be the practice that's where the action matters the most. I think it will take some time to change the mindset of the local officials and of course the people there. But the problem is that the advantage is that the China is already integrated. I mean, Hong Kong, China, Great Bay. You got the best synergy there. You got all the element there. You got the best port. You got the best supply chain. You got the shortest time in your mode production. You got the best talents all rushed in. So I think as long as they keep the stability there, it's the most important to keep the stability there. And then I'm sure we're going to, people are going to riding high this most promising land of the future of China, coupled with the two system, two economy, and all the hybrid of the global process. So I'm quite optimistic. I think that if we really carry those policies well, like 15% low taxes, like a free land for talents to come in without visas or multiple green cards and things like that, that really going to attract people coming from all over the world. And then where can be the place to make the best money than the Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Mm-hmm. That's where all the action will be in the future. So I think by 2035 it should be really become another locomotive of the at least for Asia. I mean for China, but for Asia. So this is really a very important strategic move, but also to stabilize Hong Kong as well, to meet the demands of Hong Kong young people, to really show to the world that we're going to have a more peaceful, more prosperous, and more economic vibrant Hong Kong and Great Bay for the future. So that I think Hong Kong, China will really combine and integrate it as time goes by.
Well, for those who are not that familiar with this Great Bay Area, obviously that refers to Hong Kong, Macau, and Shenzhen, and 8 other local cities in Guangdong province. Basically, we are talking about a city cluster of 11 cities in this region. Macau is another one. Ahead of this announcement of this expansion, there is an announcement of Hengqin, and Macau cooperation. How do you compare these two plans, Hui Yao?
Well, I think it's really important. Macau is another, magnetic as well. Now, the Zhuhai, which Hengqin has also set aside a large size, similar, bigger than Macau, that now combined with Macau. So I think the market, the true market system in Hong Kong and Macau can really multiply in the mainland, in the Great Bay Area. And now there's another 9 cities to be affected, to be linked on that. So I think with this integration at the Guangdong provincial level, Hong Kong and Macau level, you will see a Great Bay coordinating system in the making. And then you will see the economy integrated. You see capital rush in, venture capital comes in, talent comes in, and then you see all the logistics synergy will be the best place really in the world. I hope that stability, prosperity, and certainty will bring the more great benefit not only to China but also to Asia and to the world.
Well, John, if you look at this expansion and policies being introduced or to be introduced for this regional development, you do see this is like a part of the Chinese practice. You have a pilot zone, you practice some of the new policies, new practice. If they work, and then they will be promoted to the rest of the country. Otherwise, just stop. So what kind of spirit you see, or what kind of this message you see in terms of China's future reform and opening up?
Well, I think there is some political significance behind this I want to talk about. And for some time, people have been saying that China has been changing, the open door policy is going to be closed, China is moving to another direction. I mean, these announcements, at least, I think, serve the purpose of saying to the outside world that this is absolutely nonsense. China is still going to continue to be on the course of further development, further integrate into the world community, economically as well as politically. So, this area is a huge area in terms of its economic scale and scope. The Canton province itself accounts, its GDP is probably among the top 20 countries in the world. The size of the top 20 countries is one of the top 20 countries in the world. And you now add Hong Kong, add Macau, it's a very large economy. It's one of the major engine of growth in China. So I think with this integration, regional integration, further pushing ahead, I think this entire area is going to continue to thrive. And I think the differences between Hong Kong and this region, the mainland part of this region, as well as Macau versus this part of the region, is going to be further, the gap is going to be further closed, and these areas will be further integrated.
Steve, very briefly, obviously you need constant reform and opening up, like for a huge economy like China.
Well, to some extent, you need to open up. China's done very well by bringing in overseas technology and bringing up its own level that way. I'd be very cautious about opening up the financial sector. That's my main warning in focusing upon a services orientation here, is that the financial sector is what has destabilized the Western capitalist nations, and you don't want that happening in China. So do it, but do it carefully and make sure the financial sector is kept under control.
Thank you, Steve. Obviously, on that note, we conclude today's show. Many thanks to our guests, and thank you for watching. See you next time.